Thank you. Are we on? You good? Well, thank you, Thais, for that great welcome. I am honored to be here in Valpo. I grew up in Indianapolis, and I've lived in Washington, D.C. For 25 years, and I frankly had forgotten about the snow, because we don't get any. I bought my first pair of boots yesterday in preparation for this trip. As Thais mentioned, run a translation agency, and we like to call it the translation agency for the good guys. So I've got a little bit of a presentation for you today. I think we're going to spend a little bit talking about my journey and getting to where I am, and then we'll talk a little bit about some topics that are very important to me that we work on with translation services. I believe that the journey is often as important, if not more, than the destination. So I hope that you will see. I hope that you will see that as well. And I'm not real good with clickers, so you'll have to forgive me. But I'm hoping this is going to work. Good. Oh, also, just as a note, if you feel like tweeting, I'm not going to go, hey, you are on your phone, whatever. If you feel like tweeting, I am at Alboum Says. That's my handle on Twitter. So as I mentioned, talk a little bit about my background. I was born in Kearney, Nebraska, and I was raised in Indianapolis on the north side. So if ever there were a corn-fed kid, that would be me, going from Cornhusker to Hoosier. Is anybody here from Indianapolis? Hip hip hooray. Anybody from the north side? No. Okay. Well, I went to North Central. I grew up almost 18 years of my life in Indianapolis. And I had a regular old upbringing, regular family, middle class, nothing special. Have a brother, have a father, have a mother. And when I was in high school, my parents noticed that I had language ability. They saw that I had some talent in Spanish. And my mother she went to Indiana University, and she did her year abroad in Madrid. Her roommate was from Evansville, happened to meet a Spaniard, and her roommate got married to a Spaniard. And so my parents decided to send me to Madrid for my junior year of high school to study there. And I got to Madrid, and after 2 years of high school Spanish, I thought I was hot stuff. I mean, I thought my Spanish was like muy bueno, right? And I got there, and I soon learned it was no muy bueno, because I didn't understand anything, and I didn't feel like I could communicate well. And I was going to a private Catholic school with nuns, and I wore a uniform, and it was a very big change from North Central High School. And, they had never had an exchange student before. They didn't know what to do with me. They said, well, we'll give you 6 weeks. 6 weeks for you to improve your Spanish, and then we're just going to treat you like any old student. And that's what happened. It was sink or swim. I don't sink. I prefer to swim. So I made it happen. It was very difficult. It was really, really challenging, frankly. But it was a great experience. It taught me a lot of resiliency. Taught me how to not give up in the face of what could be really daunting odds. And I came back from Madrid speaking really good Spanish. After that, I did my senior year of high school, and I went off to study at American University in Washington, D.C. Anybody heard of AU? Okay, good. Washington is, super international city, and I wanted to be somewhere where it reminded me a little bit more of Madrid. And so I wanted to get out of Indiana, let's be honest. So anyway, I went to American, where I originally wanted to be a foreign correspondent for National Public Radio. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to travel the world and be a journalist. And I was fortunate in that Bob Edwards, who used to host their morning news program, Morning Edition, he did his master's degree at American University. I wrote him a letter, and I said, hey, Bob, because there was no email at the time, by the way, that's dated me. I wrote him a letter, and I said, hey, Bob, I would like to work for National Public Radio. Would you mind speaking with me about it? And he said, no, come on in. So I went into his office, and for an hour we talked about potential jobs and what it was like to work in journalism and for National Public Radio. And he said to me one thing I will always remember. He said, Sandra, if you want to eat well, do not be a journalist and do not work for National Public Radio. And I did a little reevaluation. I like to eat. I like to eat well. I'm not working for National Public Radio. So instead, I changed my major to Spanish and Latin American Studies, a double major, with a minor in journalism. And I also picked up a Spanish translation certificate, which the university offered, and I was taking the classes to fulfill anyway, so was no skin off my back. And got my degree at AU. I worked for a couple of years, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, but I always wanted to go back to Spain. Always wanted to go back to Spain. I'd been bitten by the bug. And so I applied for a Fulbright scholarship to go back, and this time to go to Barcelona. And I was a finalist. I didn't get it. And I said, forget it, I'm going anyway. So I have a friend who has a friend who had a friend who had a friend. And I emailed that friend of the friend of the friend. And I said, you don't know me, but I would like to do my master's degree in Barcelona. And he was a professor at the university. I said, can you help me get enrolled? So I went to Barcelona and I did my master's degree in Spanish linguistics. I did a specialty in syntax. Anybody know what everybody knows what syntax is? Basically, it's your word order, how you put words together to say things. So my master's thesis actually was 100 pages approximately on a single Spanish preposition, the preposition day, like have a nice day. Writing it was not a nice day. And it was, really, frankly, it was pretty, I have copies here, just to pass around so you can peruse how horrible it was. It's in English, I managed to convince them to let me write it in English. But my father actually said, I have 3 words to describe your thesis. Esoteric. I said, yep, that's about right. Anyway, I did what I loved, I studied what I loved. I can parse a sentence. Is that going to pay the bills? No. Between the time that I graduated from American and when I went to Barcelona, there was about 2 years before I found my path of what I wanted to do. The first job I had out of college, I was working for as a contractor for the Department of Justice, the U.S. Department of Justice, and I was working for the National Criminal Justice Reference Service, which was a contract, basically a data warehouse for justice data, interesting data on recidivism and incarceration and death penalty and all sorts of things. My title was an International Criminal Justice Networking Liaison, which was a fancy pants term for administrative assistant. The title didn't even fit on my card. It was pretty funny. I don't know anything about criminal justice, never took a class in it, don't know the first thing, don't care. They hired me because I, quote, knew computers and I knew Spanish. I don't know any job these days you can get hired for where you know computers and you get a job. I don't know what that means anymore. But this was 1996, so I knew computers. I stayed there for about a year, didn't like it. Moved on to a different contract at the U.S. Agency for International Development. It's part of the U.S. Department of State. It's a sort of a subdivision. And I was working in the Environmental Technology Network for the Americas. DC is fun because everything is an acronym and everything has a long title. This was Aetna, right? The other thing was NCJRS. But the Environmental Technology Network for the Americas was trying to promote wastewater and landfill solutions, clean environmental solutions to generally poor countries. It was wildly unsuccessful, which was to be expected. I was there for about a year. That's when I applied for the Fulbright scholarship, didn't get it, and decided to go to Spain anyway. After I got back from my master's degree, I got my dream job, or what I considered to be my dream job, working at the Embassy of Spain in Washington, D.C. D.C.'s full of embassies. There's an embassy from every country there, pretty much. And I'd always driven past the Embassy of Spain and said, I'm going to work there. I'm going to work there. One day, I actually landed a job as the assistant ambassador there. It was not my dream job. I didn't know it was not my dream job, but it was terribly political and not a whole lot of fun. What was fun about it was the embassy parties, which I had to attend every single one of them. And I will tell you a secret. At the embassy parties for the Embassy of Spain, when I was standing there and everybody's eating their little canapes and acting very important, people would be talking. Oh, the food is so good, they'd say. This food is so amazing. I love coming to these parties. Food, the food. You're going to be sitting there like, yeah, okay, whatever. The secret is that other than the jamón serrano, the Spanish ham, and the tortilla española, the potato omelet that's typical of Spain, all of our appetizers were purchased at Costco. I know this because I went and purchased some of them. And so people are standing there eating their little dainty quiches and saying how good they are. And I'm thinking, well, you can buy them by the 100 at Costco. They're cheap. Anyway, I worked there for about 2.5 years. And then I moved on to a new job at Schmelzer Apteker Chapter. Does anybody recognize this building, by the way? It's a very famous building, but you know, the average age in this room is probably not old enough to. We have anybody? No, nothing. What do we have?
Watergate.
Thank you. It's the Watergate building, famous, you know, Watergate, Nixon, Watergate. This is the Watergate building. There are offices in the Watergate building, of course, and the offices of this particular law firm were in the Watergate building. And I was hired, as I understood it, to be a trade assistant to 2 attorneys who were working on the Central American Free Trade Agreement negotiations. They were going to, these 2 attorneys, one was a partner and one was an associate, and they were representing Honduras in the CAFTA negotiations. Honduras has a very large textile industry, in fact, and so they were working on that. But actually what happened was, while the attorneys wanted me to be an assistant, a trade assistant, HR really wanted me to be a secretary. And that's not exactly what I had hoped for, unfortunately. But one day, about 8 months or so after I started working there, my boss, my partner boss, Tony Smith, calls me into his office and he says, "Sandra, have a seat." You don't want to hear that from your boss, ever. I go, I sit down on his couch, and he says to me, "You are, without a doubt, the worst secretary I have ever had." And the man was probably like in his late 50s, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, he was about in his late 50s. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm losing my job today. I'm getting fired. Today I'm getting fired. Today's a good day to find a new job. He said, "But I'll tell you something. I think you've got more in you. I think you're smarter. I think you have more capability than this. I think this job is a really bad fit for you, and I believe in you. I believe in you. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you 6 months. 6 months to figure out what you're doing with your life. Whatever. I don't care. Just figure out something. 6 months from today, I am going to go to HR and tell them what a crappy secretary you are. In the meanwhile, I need you to keep me going, get my filings in, get my stuff done. Doesn't have to be pretty, but get it done. But you have 6 months. Off you go." And I went out to my desk and I sat down and I said, "I'm losing my job in 6 months. I'm losing my job in 6 months." So that was the kick in the pants that I needed to reevaluate my life. I turned a no into a yes. And I decided, you know what? I really like translating. I did it to pay my rent while I lived in Barcelona. I have a translation certificate. I like it. It's good enough. I think I'm going to translate. I didn't have any children at the time. I didn't have any major financial obligations. My husband and I had enough saved up that I could probably do 2 years of complete and utter failure before we actually had to throw in the towel and I had to get another job again. So I decided to start translating. And I started my company in January of 2004. I started out as a freelance translator. And this beautiful thing was my first website. I did it on a template through Verizon. The second version of it actually had the image whoosh in. It was so cool. I mean, it was like latest and greatest technology. I don't even think it was Java. I don't know what it was, but it whooshed in. It was fantastic. But anyway, it was just sort of your generic, you got some pencils, you got a globe, you got some language about globalization. I don't know, you know, I put whatever, and I started translating. I started as a freelancer, but really soon after I started freelancing, I got contacted by another agency, by a translation agency in Salt Lake City, and they said, "Hey, we are looking for a project manager." who can help us project manage all of our work. And we found you online, and we think you'd be great. Do you want to do that? And I said, well, okay, that sounds interesting. So what they would do is they would send me lots and lots of work, files that needed to be translated in all sorts of languages. They would give me a budget, and then they would tell me that I had to go get it done. And I would get it done, and whatever I could find the translators for, the difference between my budget and what I was paying out, that was my margin. So it behooves me to find somebody really cheap so that I can make a nice margin. However, the fact is that the budget was already so low that I was forced to find bottom feeder translators who were not reliable and didn't do a good job. So I spent a lot of nights up chasing translators on the other side of the globe by email, trying to get them to answer their emails. Where's my file? Where's my file? Nothing, nothing, nothing. I had a lot of sleepless nights. But it was trial by fire again, and I learned. It was like a kick in the pants for project management. And that's when I figured out, you know what? I think I like project managing better than I actually like translating. And there's money to be made, because I only have 10 fingers. They only type so quickly. I can only do so much work. I can only charge so much. I'm not a rocket scientist. I don't have some crazy specialty. But if I outsource to other people, good people in this case, people that I know who are good, not on the other side of the planet, but if I outsource, I could have 100 fingers typing for me. I could have 1,000 fingers typing for me all at the same time, and I'm making this much off of the top of everybody who's doing their work. So I became an agency. I soon became an agency, and I started outsourcing. Now, of course, you have baby steps, and then you have babies. So this is the token aw moment. So this is my son David. He was born in 2006. Meanwhile, I took no maternity leave. I'm still working. It's just me. And then in 2008, Lauren was born. I love this picture. Sorry, I'm a sucker for this picture. So I'm working my way through having newborns and babies and toddlers. My office is in the house. Things are going missing. My son runs through with just a diaper on. I mean, it's craziness, right? I'm trying to run this company, and it's just absolutely insane. And it gets to the point where I am just overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed with motherhood, which is very difficult. I'm overwhelmed with working, which is very difficult. I'm overwhelmed with running a household, which is very difficult. Everything is just piling up on me. And we took a vacation, and my first question was, does the bed and breakfast have internet? Because I didn't have anybody who could help me with my company. And I said, I need to do something about that. So what I did was, I went to see a business shrink. A business shrink is a business coach, basically. She's a business coach. And she asks you a lot of really hard questions. You pay her a lot of money. She asks you a lot of really hard questions. She does not answer those questions for you. And she helps you figure out your purpose in life. This is Margarita. She's amazing. Amazing. So the first question she asks me is, so you want to grow your company? What do you want it to look like when you're done growing your company? And I said, well, I don't know. And she said, well, you can't grow a company. You can't get from point A to point B if you don't know what point B looks like. I said, well, that's fair enough. She said, so after you grow your company, are you going to hire people? I said, yeah. She said, well, what are they going to do? I said, I don't know, everything. I do everything. They're going to do what I do, everything. She said, well, you need to figure out what they're going to do. I said, all right. She said, after you hire these people, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. Why are you asking me these questions? Stop asking me these questions. She said, well, are you going to micromanage your staff? I said, no. Oh, no, we do not micromanage. So well, what do you really want to do once you've taken the burden off of yourself? And then, when you have this new company, who's your client going to be? And I said, people who need translation work? I don't know. Stop asking me questions. She said, go home. Make an Excel spreadsheet. I want you to put the names of all of your clients that you've had since the very first day you started on that spreadsheet. And I want you to come up with some categories for them, like legal or medical or industrial or whatever, because I was working for whoever came through the door at that point. I want you to put how much money how much work they've sent you since then, in terms of money. And then I want want you to put an X next to the ones that you like working with the best. Because inevitably, the people who send you the most work are the biggest pain in the butts that there are. So I went home and I made this spreadsheet, and I thought, really, truly thought that my agency was the agency for the law firms. And I found out that 70% of my clients were nonprofits, and I didn't even know it. And the ones with the X's next to them, guess what they were? Nonprofits, and I didn't even know it. So I brought this spreadsheet back to Margarita, and I showed it to her, and she said, well, that's really silly. You should just rebrand. You should be the agency for the good guys. And I thought, oh my God, now I know why I've paid you all this money. So I rebranded. I went from this really hideous globe on a blue background to, this was the logo at the time I was with Margarita, and it's some sort of kind of like my signature, sort of kind of, to something a little more friendly, touchy-feely, happy, nice colors, to finally the current logo, which is this one. It's a little different. We tweaked the rotation of the circle, and the colors are a little bit more serious. We went from turquoise to like a blue-gray. And people always ask, oh, well, are those flower petals? Sure. Are those raindrops? Mm-hmm. Are they cultures? Yeah. Languages? Uh-huh. Countries? Yes. They are whatever you'd like them to be. That's what they are. And I fixed up the website. So now we're the agency for the good guys. And now we look like the people we serve. Big pictures. Many translate, few transform, removing language barriers, pictures of people. You know, we wanted something that looked more National Geographic-y and less business meetings and globes and pencils. So this is the current website, alboum.com. And we focused on 4 main areas: public health, education, environment, and human services. Tonight, I'm going to speak to you a little bit about public health and education, which are the two main sectors that we serve. Probably 80 to 90% of business is in public health and education. So public health is often confused with medical or medicine. It's not the same thing. Public health is actually the promotion of health, promotion and protection of health of people where they live, work, and play. It's a much more broad category. We're not talking doctors, medical records, hospitals. This is not what we're dealing with. What we're dealing with is promoting wellness, encouraging healthy behavior. We're researching disease and injury prevention, and also we're detecting, preventing, and responding to infectious diseases. It's much more of a broad category than doctors and hospitals. Public health has lots and lots and lots of subsets. The animation is going to pick up. But all of these things are considered public health sectors. I mean, you'll see things on here that you go, yeah, of course, you know, cancer or communicable disease or school-based healthcare, sure. But public health practitioners, and you can get a master's degree in MPH, a master's in public health, or a PhD. They're working on all sorts of topics like these. Zika. Zika was hot a couple of years ago, not so much anymore. But, for example, you'll see up here transportation. And you say, transportation? How's that a public health concern? Right? Doesn't really seem to jive, but it does actually, because if you think about it, for example, when streets are well designed, when stoplights are well placed, when lighting, street lighting is properly done, when speed limits are implemented, we cut down on death and injury, right? Public health concentrates on preventing death and injury. Transportation is a public health concern. Road safety. So we work actually quite a bit in road safety these days. It's sort of trendy these days. But what we probably most work on is tobacco control. This is a horrid picture. It's a shocking, horrible picture. Tobacco control is something that is very close to my heart, and I'm going to stand up here and sort of expound on all the ills of tobacco for a little bit. But when I was a child, when I was little, my dad smoked. And I remember going into his room when I was little. I mean, I must have been 5 or 6. Going into his room every morning and saying, "Daddy, Daddy, are you going to stop smoking today?" And he'd say, "Yeah," or "No," or "Go away," or "Shut up, kid," or whatever he would say. But he wouldn't give me an answer. But I remember that I hated it. And it's being a mom of 2, I am very attuned to the lures of smoking and how smoking has morphed. And so we work with anti-tobacco organizations who are working worldwide to help make it harder for big tobacco to advertise and to promote and to lure children. And tobacco is a public health concern because women who smoke have lower birth weight babies. Their babies are born sick. These things all pull on the health systems of the world, and it's something that I look at as one of my pet projects. Anyway, this picture is from Indonesia. These boys are probably, if I had to guess, 10 or so. It's a real picture, it's not staged. In Indonesia, so you know, we do a lot of work in Indonesia. Does anybody know what language is spoken in Indonesia? No? Bahasa Indonesia is called Bahasa. Well, it's called Bahasa Indonesia, because Bahasa actually just means language, so it's Bahasa Indonesia, language of Indonesia. Anyway, in Indonesia, 63% of adult males smoke. 63%. 5% of women do. It's a big difference. Of those who smoke, 80% smoke something called a kretek. It's a local clove-flavored cigarette. Kreteks have more than 4 times the amount of tobacco as of a regular cigarette. They are very, very potent. 180,000 people in Indonesia work directly for kretek manufacturers. And it's estimated that over 10 million Indonesians work indirectly for the kretek industry. And many of them are children. Probably these kids work in the fields picking tobacco, and then they smoke. These are, I don't know if these are kreteks or actual cigarettes. It is estimated that over 30% of Indonesian children smoke their first cigarette by age 10. It's horrible. You couldn't imagine something like that happening here in the States. We're much more aware of the ills of smoking. Anti-smoking campaigns have done very well here. But big tobacco works worldwide. And they work in societies where they're not quite as aware. So my clients work with the local anti-tobacco folks in Indonesia and other countries to translate the legislation, the current legislation, and work with the anti-tobacco folks to tighten it up, make it harder to smoke, harder to advertise, harder to lure children, make it harder, more expensive to smoke. Indonesia, finally, is the 5th largest tobacco market in the world. In 2008, over 165 billion, that's billion with a B, cigarettes were sold in Indonesia. It's a lot of cigarettes. Here are some numbers for you. Just blow you away with a few numbers. About 1.25 billion people smoke worldwide right now. And it's estimated that by around 2025, that number is going to go up to 2 billion people. The world population, I believe, is around 8 billion. Most of those smokers, of the 1.25 billion, 1 billion of them are estimated to live in developing or transitional countries. That means not Western Europe. That means not the United States. That means countries where smoking is it's not known as much. People don't know as much about how bad it is for you. Around 33% of the world male population smokes worldwide. You wouldn't know it from the United States, but worldwide. And about 20% of young teenagers do. This one's going to blow you away. Every year, the tobacco industry produces 6 trillion cigarettes. That's enough to go from Earth to Mars and back a couple of times when you lay them end to end. 6 trillion cigarettes per year. 15 billion are sold daily, 10 million per minute. It's a big industry. My clients are translating worldwide. They're translating their materials to work on this and try and combat this. China is actually the world's largest tobacco consumer, manufacturer of any country in the world. We work a lot in China. We do a lot of work in Chinese. We were trying to get Beijing smoke-free for the Olympics, and we did. My clients did, through our help translating. 3.2 million tons of tobacco leaf. Look at the revenues, $95.2 billion with profits of $19 billion. It's nuts. It's 7 to 10% of China's total annual revenue. It's tobacco. Tobacco is a big business. Here is a chart. I love this chart. It has a lot of the big tobacco companies. Japan Tobacco, got Philip Morris USA, which is also known as Altria. There's also Philip Morris International, Imperial British American Tobacco, and China National Tobacco Corp, CNTC. Compared to the gross domestic products of different countries. You can see that, this is such big business that China National Tobacco Corp in 2012 had gross revenues of $95.2 billion. The GDP of Morocco was $96 billion. It is the same size. What China National Tobacco Corporation makes in a year is the same as what Morocco makes in a year. This is big, big business. And these are not dinky little countries either. So my main funding client is Michael Bloomberg. I'm assuming you've heard of Michael Bloomberg from New York. He is very much into public health. He had a rather lampooned battle with diet sodas and sodas in general, not too a few years ago. But Bloomberg Philanthropies has committed over $1 billion, actually nearly $1 billion, since 2007 to combat tobacco use worldwide. So my client, the Bloomberg Initiative to Reduce Tobacco Use, funds many of my clients. My clients are the Campaign for Tobacco for Kids, the American Cancer Society, Bloomberg Philanthropies, the World Health Organization, the International Union Against Tuberculosis and Lung Disease. All of these receive funds from Bloomberg in the global anti-tobacco fight. This is really close to me. I mean, because my father smoked, I don't want to see my children smoke, and people worldwide don't know of the ills of smoking generally. So how do they lure children, which is what I'm more focused on? What do they do? And how are we translating to keep this from happening? Well, first what they do is big tobacco sponsors. They sponsor concerts. Here's a Kelly Clarkson concert in Indonesia that a Indonesian, LA Lights, an Indonesian tobacco company, sponsored. The tobacco promotion sector in Indonesia is worth $250 million. It's a big market. So they'll sponsor a concert. Or how many people remember seeing drivers wearing Marlboro and cigarette ads on them? You don't see that much in the States anymore. They don't wear that. But this is a Formula One. This is Michael Schumacher. And wearing Marlboro. The kids look at that and they go, hey, my hero is wearing Marlboro. That must mean it's okay. So we work locally to try and remove the ability of big tobacco to sponsor so visibly cars. You can see the car in the background and the drivers. Here's a tennis tournament. I think this is Nadal, I'm pretty sure. It's Davidoff. It's a Swiss tobacco company. And they were sponsoring the Swiss Open. Very visible. My favorite tennis player plays right in front of Davidoff. That must mean it's okay. They lure children in. You're going to have to forgive me while I read something to you. But what they do is they lure children by making smoking look fun and cool and not dangerous. So this is Blue. Blue is a vaping system. I am going to ask, although I probably know the answer, does anybody here not know what vaping is? Aha. It's very telling. You all know what vaping is because vaping is very popular. Very, very popular. So vaping, as you know, they've got the cartridge. The cartridge has nicotine. It has flavorings in it. It has chemicals in it. It's not regulated, so they don't always know what chemicals are in it, but sometimes it's glycerin or polyethylene glycol. Nobody really knows what's in these cartridges, but you've got the heating coil and the atomizer, and you suck on it, and then the vapor comes out. And it comes in flavors. It comes in flavors. So this is blue. This is cherry crush flavor. Blue also offers flavors such as menthol, vivid vanilla, cherry crush, blueberry, strawberry mint, Carolina bold, pina colada, mint chocolate, glacier mint, gold leaf, caramel cafe, and berry cobbler. Delicious. Doesn't look like a cigarette. Doesn't taste like a cigarette. Must not be bad for me. You guys are probably too young, and I'm going to play the old person card, to remember candy cigarettes. Does anybody else in the room who's not a student remember candy cigarettes? Do y'all remember the candy cigarettes that you would, they like a puff of something came out of them? You could blow on them and like this white smoky stuff would come out? They used to market these things. The cigarette companies, it was actually proven that the cigarette companies are sponsoring the makers of this candy to get children accustomed to smoking. So this is Machismo candy cigarettes. It was available on Amazon. It is no longer, but if you Google candy cigarettes on Amazon, there are other brands that are out there. And the advertising for this one says, these candy cigarettes are made specifically for manly men. Women, children, and sissies need not apply. Each pack contains 12 long sticks of orange-flavored candy that look somewhat like a real cigarette. Children love it. They suck on it, they don't know, but all of a sudden it's just okay. So my clients translate to make sure that they know that this is not okay. And finally, here's XEL. I like this one. I like how they advertise it with fruit, makes it look really healthy. Fruit salad. It's not a cigarette, it's a fruit salad. This is also a vaping system. They have flavors like Mr. Meringue, Monkey Snack, Irish Cappuccino, and Cola. And on their website, the description says, guilt-free indulgence is the name of the game when it comes to specialty flavors. Our sweet specialty flavors have captured the decadent taste of your favorite desserts and transformed them into a calorie-free treat. Is there any mention of the fact that it's tobacco? Sound delicious? Sound like a calorie-free treat? I can have dessert, no calories? Children look at that and they go, looks good to me. So my clients translate to make it harder. Now, I'm going to give you a warning before I show the next slide. These are grotesque pictures I'm going to show you, okay? So if you're squeamish, you may want to close your eyes. They're not horrid, but they're not pretty. We also work on warning labels, making sure that packs of cigarettes have warning labels on them, translated into the local languages so that people know that this is what smoking does to you. And we work with the local governments to make sure that the warning labels are of sufficient size and color so that they're visible. Because, I mean, what good is a warning label if it's in 4-point font, right? You can't read it. These are warning labels from Vietnam. They are on packs of cigarettes that you buy in Vietnam. The top one here, top left, I'll go top left and then across. So this top left one, smoking causes bad breath and tooth decay. Smoking causes cancer. Smoking causes cancer of the throat and the larynx. Tobacco smoke is very harmful to the fetus and young children. Smoking causes heart disease. And smoking leads to a slow and painful death. My clients are constantly monitoring the tobacco warning labels, making sure that they say the right things and that they're placed properly, giving feedback to the local legislators to make sure that they're doing the job that they're supposed to do. One of the projects that we worked on was called the Tobacco Atlas. It is a publication by the American Cancer Society in conjunction with the World Lung Foundation. And it is for researchers. It's a big splashy publication. with lots and lots of information. I actually got a lot of the information for this presentation from the Tobacco Atlas. It's presented every year, or every time the World Conference on Tobacco or Health happens, which is, I think, every 3 years, and is launched. And we translated this Tobacco Atlas into 4 languages, into Arabic, into Chinese, Mandarin Chinese, into Spanish and French. It helps researchers worldwide to know what's going on, the statistics, and help them work on their own local level. So I actually have some copies here to pass around as well. I have English, Arabic, and Chinese for you. So you can take a look. I'll pass 2 over here and 1 over here. I don't expect you to speak Chinese or Arabic, but if you do, that's fantastic. If you find any mistakes, we didn't make them.
Yeah.
As you can tell, I'm standing up here talking about smoking. I like to be able to combine my passion, which is keeping children healthy, with my profession, which is translating for organizations that are out there working to keep people healthy, and in this case, with tobacco control. Now I'm going to move on to something just a little bit happier. This is sort of depressing. Schools. We work a lot in education. Public school systems, K-12. How many of you actually, out of curiosity, are from the Valpo area? That counts like Maryville and, Hamden and all that. Okay, how many of you are from the Chicago area? How many of you would say you're outside of Illinois, anywhere in Illinois or anywhere in Indiana? That's a pretty hefty number. Okay, good. So you probably remember in your schools, over the years, perhaps not so much when you were little, but as you got older, going through high school, there was an increasing number of immigrant families coming into your schools. Would you say that is correct? Lots of immigrants, not necessarily Hispanics, everything, right? I mean, Hispanic population is growing in the United States, clearly, but we also have lots of other populations coming in, refugees resettling in the United States. Well, the fact is that these children are coming into our schools, and they're coming in with families that don't speak English. Their parents don't speak English. They are right off the boat is the phrase. It's not, I don't know if we use it anymore, but they're right off the boat, and they don't speak English. Well, in fall of 2017, we had 50.7 million students, it says will, I got the verb tense wrong. Anyway, attended public elementary and secondary schools in the United States. And of those 50.7 million, about 4.6 million were English language learners. They were not native English speakers. They were not from native English-speaking families. They think about half, call it half of foreign-born parents of children 8 and under have limited English proficiency. How does this affect our school systems, right? The schools have to send stuff home to the parents, but they don't speak English. The schools want to involve the parents, but they don't speak English. And they've done tons and tons of studies over time that show that if parents are involved in the education of their children, the children do better, regardless of the income or the background. If your parents are involved in your education, the kids are going to get higher test scores, better grades, pass their classes, move on, move through the years of schooling, earn credits, attend school, have better behavior, social skills, adapt well, even go to college, if the parents are involved. If the parents aren't involved, nobody's there at home sort of pushing the children to succeed, the children tend to drop out and have behavior problems. In 2014-15, obviously, most English language learner students were Spanish speakers, of Spanish-speaking families. But actually, surprisingly, Arabic is the second most popular English language learner language for families in the country, actually, in home languages, followed by Chinese and Vietnamese. A lot of that is West Coast. English, which I forgot the footnote, so I can't explain why English is on this list. Hmong. Anybody heard of Hmong? Who has not heard of Hmong? Okay, Hmong. Hmong is in Southeast Asia. They don't really have a country. They're Thailand and Burma, and they're sort of borderless. And there's two types of Hmong, green Hmong and white Hmong. That's what the languages are called, green Hmong and white Hmong, and they are not mutually intelligible, so that causes an even bigger problem. Somali and Russian, Haitian Creole, Tagalog, where's Tagalog from?
Philippines.
Philippines, and Korean. Would anybody have guessed that in Indiana, other than Mexico, the second biggest population origin of legal immigrants in Indiana is from Myanmar, also known as Burma? Did you know that? Did you know that Terre Haute has the largest population of Burmese in the entire country? Refugee resettlement. They come to Terre Haute, they settle. They get jobs, they have to go see doctors. Doctors don't speak Burmese. And there's lots of dialects of Burmese, and they are not mutually intelligible, any of them. They have to go to school. Schools have to send home things to the parents in Burmese. There's lots of other interesting languages. I love this map. I think it's fascinating. I mean, who would have known that in New Hampshire and Vermont and North Dakota, Bhutan is the most popular country? People coming from other countries. Bhutan. Does anybody know where Bhutan is? Hmm? Is it next to Nepal? Yeah, I think so. I'll have to look. I actually don't know. I don't know. But, you know, I mean, it's Bhutan or Myanmar. There's a lot of Burmese here in the center of the country. Here in Iowa, you got Ethiopians, you got Filipinos in Nevada and California. You have Indians, Iraqis. There's a lot of Iraqis in Idaho. Who knew? There's also a lot of Iraqis in Michigan, right? And these schools, they have to send home student manuals and flyers and documents. And, you know, like, for example, here I'll give you an example. My two children both have IEPs. An IEP is an individualized education plan. My children, my son had some delays in his fine motor skills. My daughter has something of a visual processing disorder, whatever. The schools, it's under special education. The schools come together and they put together a plan with how to help my kids excel in school, but with the limitations that they have, how they're going to work on that. And it's a great and wonderful thing. And I have meetings at school all the time for my kids, but I speak English. They give me stacks of paperwork, which they're required by law to give me, but I speak English. Imagine if your child had some special education issue and you didn't speak English, and they're giving you all of this paper and trying to meet with you 4 times a year to discuss the goals and plans and skills and this and that, and you don't understand what's going on. You can't read it. They don't have interpreters for you. It is required by law, federal law, for the schools to provide you with translations of the documents that you are signing off on, saying, yes, I agree with this plan. Lots of schools don't do it. So we translate IEPs. In Idaho, we translated last year over 200 individualized education plans for a school district, Blaine County, outside of Sun Valley. Any skiers? Do we have anybody who skis? Sun Valley's a great ski place. Lots of Hispanics live there. Here's Chicago. So how many of you are from the Chicago suburbs? Okay. Is anybody from any of these districts that are listed? I got anybody? Where are you from?
Joliet.
Joliet, okay. Anybody else? No. Wow, that's amazing. I thought we'd get more. So these are the districts that we're working for example, in Chicago, in the Chicago area. We work nationally, but these are the ones in Chicago. And they have lots and lots of needs. Chicago's a city of immigrants. It's a city of immigrants. And we translate a lot of stuff for them in a lot of different languages, trying to make the playing field level for all parents and all families so that everybody can excel in school. We do a lot of languages, though. I'm just going to let this flip up. You may see things you don't recognize, I'll ask. These are all languages that we've translated for Chicago area districts. This is just Chicago. Anything on there you don't recognize? do you not recognize on there? Go. Phalam Chin. Phalam Chin is Burma, Myanmar. What else? Just yell it out, it's fine. Cebuano. Cebuano's Philippines. What else? What? Zomi. Zomi is northwest Burma, also known as Zo, Yaw, or Jaw. That's 4 names. What else? Karenni, Burma. Urdu. Anybody else with Urdu? Urdu, Pakistan. What else?
Oromo.
What? Oromo. Oromo is spoken in northern Ethiopia. Yeah? There's a lot of languages out there. There's a million languages out, well, not really a million, but there's a million languages out there. And these Chicago districts have families from all of these places that they need to communicate with, and we help them. A very quick and very funny story about Tongan. Request comes in for Tongan. I say, well, that's odd. Do you have a big Pacific Islander population? Tonga, right? She says, no. He's from Zaire. I said, what? Guess what? Tongan, different Tongan, Zaire. We were about to give him like Tongan, like, island language. Glad I asked. Anyway, we also work nationally for other districts. In California, West Coast, Texas, in our area, in the Mid-Atlantic, lots in the Virginia and Maryland and West Virginia area. Here's some more languages that we've done for them, for these districts. Lots of languages. We're just simply trying to level the playing field. And this all comes because I have kids, and I want them to have the same opportunities as every other child, and I want every other child to have the same opportunities as my kids. And I sleep really well at night because I know that we're helping to do something like that. To finish up, I'm going to tell you really quickly about this book that I bought. It's called Solve for Happy. It's by Mo Gaudat. He works for Google. He is really fascinating. You can Google the guy from Google. There's lots of, I think he might have given a TED talk, but there's a lot online from him. And Mo, I believe he's Egyptian. His son, Ali, went in for a regular old appendectomy when he was 21 and died on the table. Horrible thing. No parent ever wants that to happen. Horrible thing. And Mo was devastated, but Mo made a decision to find the happiness in life. And I read this book. Well, he decided that happiness was an equation. Happiness was a choice, which we all have heard before, I'm sure. But he wrote this book, and I found this book tremendously powerful. I would highly recommend it. It's available on Amazon. I get nothing off the sale of it. But one of the exercises in this book that he asks you to do is he says, make a list. Write out the sentence, I feel happy when, and then fill in the response. Note, I'm not saying such and such makes me happy. Different. I'm saying I feel happy when. So I went and I made this list. I came up with 17 things. Every so often I come up with another one. I've given you cards on your chair. I would like you to take a few moments, take out a pen, and write down a few things that you could answer this question. I feel happy when. And it could be super simple. I feel happy when I eat pizza, right? Pizza makes people happy, right? Or it could be something even bigger. But I'll give you a few minutes to write this out. You can continue working on this later if you'd like. I'm going to tell you a few of the things that were on my list. I feel happy when I am working for progressive causes. I feel happy when I am with people of different cultures and backgrounds. I feel happy when I am making other people happy. I feel happy when I am eating dark chocolate. It's true. I work on this list every so often, and it's amazing how it matches up with what I turned my life into. Steve Jobs said, "The only way to do great work is to love what you do. And if you haven't found it yet, keep looking, don't settle." And Eckhart Tolle, who is an author and channeler and the high priest of being present, very into being present, said, "Surrender to what is. Say yes to life and see how life suddenly starts working for you rather than against you." So my challenge to you tonight, and for the rest of your semester and the rest of your life, if you will, is to find ways, make ways to integrate your happy with your daily life. I wish all of you, well, first of all, thank you for coming. I'm honored, I'm flattered, frankly. But I wish all of you many, many yeses and much, much happiness in life. This has been a pleasure. Thank you.